Bid everybody welcome, and I'm going to try to tone my speech down, because usually I get to rambling and I'll carry on until somebody grabs me by the collar and throws me out. So I'm going to tone it down this time. But I've got some fellows here today that's been with scouting for a long time. I won't say they were here during the 20s when Grant Higgins was a scoutmaster, and the meetings were held in the old Margaret Hotel, but they come along and added quite a bit to it. We have with us today Dusty Deschamps, Mike Nelson, and Bill Unger. I'm gonna get kind of wordy here. I'm gonna throw a little story in about one of my personal experiences with me and my family with scouting. And I didn't realize just how effective these young men were until I come across this experience. It happened here not too long ago with my brother-in-law's granddaughter. Her name was Bethany Stolberg. She contracted a rare cancer and wasn't expected to live. Well, when we heard this, we rolled our sleeves up and said, "There's no way. You know, we're gonna organize fundraisers. We're gonna do what we can to see that this don't happen." So we did. We got the collection jars all around Missoula County, and we were doing all right. But then this young fellow came up. His name was Wes Thomas, and Wes was an Eagle Scout, and he needed a project. The project was, let me get into my notes here a little bit. He wanted to do some leadership things. So what he did was he organized what they called the Parents' Prom. And what this was a gathering at the, I'm at a loss for the name of this Parkside Inn. Okay. He also arranged for a bunch of contributors to donate items for a silent auction. That program started at 6 o'clock. There was a dinner served. We all dressed up fancy. We had us a good time. The program got underway. The silent auction began, and the whole thing was followed up with an evening of dancing. The end of this whole scenario was that we had raised, this young fellow had raised $10,000, and also, if I get a little touchy here, it's because this really hit home. He arranged for this little girl to go to Disneyland. And this was arranged through the Montana Hope Project. So, an Eagle Scout hit us and rocked us right to our heels. The good part of this, the best part of this whole story, was the fact that Bethany, the little girl, is now going to school over here at Border, picking up where we left off, and she's cancer-free. So when I think of scouts, you know, this is special, really plucks my heartstrings. These kids are special. So with that, I want to turn it off, turn it over to Mike and Dusty and Bill. But I did have one question I have read, and it's in the grassroots book. There's a story about a frog that Mike was supposed to take care of. And I don't know the end of that story, so Mike, what became of that?
Well, it was in the 6th grade, of course. Larry Burlingame, who was big in Scouts here and everything, he was always doing some kind of a project, and they had a terrarium, you know, and then we had a frog and a bunch of moss and different things in it. And when it was Christmas, I think during Christmas vacation, we came back, and the frog was only half there. And is what it was, there was a big wood beetle in there that we didn't know, or I mean that we had caught and put in there, and it had eaten half of the frog in half. I hadn't thought of that, Max, since the 6th grade.
You know, my memories of Larry Burlingame were great ones.
Great ones.
I believe he came in when we were in the 6th grade. The first man teacher we had.
Right.
And I was a bit of a hooligan at the time. And with the lady teachers, I got away with a lot more than what I should have. And I was wondering what Larry was going to do if I get to clowning around. He eventually wound up being one of my best friends. I had the good fortune of helping him teach a hunter safety course one time. And I thought that was rather an honor for me to stand up in front of a bunch of students with this old veteran teacher. One of the high points of my life. So, anyway, my friend Tom Yule was with us. Tom was a scout leader and has his troop. He has taken them up through the Mission Range. And Tom has a slide series here that kind of shows some of his hikes up through there, and the young fellows that was involved in that. It's magnificent pictures. And I'm sure you're all going to enjoy seeing these. So we'll start out with Tom. I think you got another appointment after this, don't you?
No, I'm good.
Okay. So I'll cut Tom in first then, and then we'll go to the rest of us.
Well, first of all, I'm not going to get too wordy here either. I like to watch the yawn factor. But it started out years ago. It all started with my father, Ralph Yule, who ran the garage for a number of years and started it. And he, when I was growing up, when I was about 11 or 12 or so, my father developed some really bad back problems. Those of you that know my dad probably never dreamed he had back problems. But he kayaked until age 80. But he did have some severe back problems, and our doctor was old Dr. Harris. I don't know whether some of you might have remember him. But Dr. Harris said that, well, we could fuse things, and of course back then the technology wasn't what it is now. And he said that if we could fuse that back, but he says if you treat it right, it'll fuse itself and you'll be fine. And I think we need more doctors like Dr. Harris now. But at any rate, Dad said, well, what should I do? He says, put a backpack on your back. And so he did. And the rest was sort of history. He started hiking, and the first place we went as a family was we walked into Crystal Lake from Lindbergh. Dad was always an avid canoeist and later a kayaker. And we took the canoe with the little outboard motor. We ran over to the other end of Lindbergh Lake and hiked up the bottom of Crystal Lake. And from there, we could see those big mountains up above. And that's when the love affair began. And later on, a fellow moved into our area. That was a member of our church. And he contacted my father and said, I hear you like to go camping. He says, I'm the new scoutmaster. Would you be my assistant? And Dad says, well, only one condition. I said, what's that? I don't do campgrounds. And he says, if we camp, it's going to be out in the brush. And so from then on, they started doing this once a year. They would get the kids ready, and they would take a trip once a year. They had to qualify. In order to qualify for this trip, they had to be first class, or 14, or their parent came along. They did not operate a babysitting service. And so with that, it was an unsupported 6-day trip to the missions with no horse support, everything on their backs to last them 6 days. And there were a lot of good things that the kids learned, and one of the things was they learned to help each other. And it was really heart-rending to see the big kids would carry the little kids' pack when it got tough, and they would help them. Later on, after I got out of college and started raising kids of my own, then I got involved as a scout leader. And one year, the scouts said, "We're bored with hiking. We want to paddle." They thought that'd be easy. I said, "Well, if you're going to paddle and run canoes, then you've got to have some training." And so we worked real hard. And as a reward for that, we took some kids down to the Smith River. This was before a permit was required. And we spent that summer, for about 7 days, we went down the Smith River. And I remember that with real fondness because in all my years as a scout leader, I felt the best on that year because we happened to have one kid that, part of the problem, and no disrespect to mothers here, when we go on these trips, we'd always take pictures, we call them mother scary pictures. But we had one young man that he'd had a birth defect, and one of his hands was kind of crippled up like that. And he walked almost like I did, maybe not quite as bad, but he had a pretty good limp to him, and his mother was just afraid to let him go out on a camp out. She just thought that he couldn't do it, and I kept trying to tell her, be all right, be all right. Well, I finally gathered up enough lies, and we put together, I said, well, canoeing's different. It's a lot safer than hiking. And so I got to working with this young man, and because his hand was bent like that, it just fit over the top of a canoe paddle. And my method of paddling the canoe, we learned from a book back east where the old trappers never changed sides when they paddled, except to rest their arms. They would control the boat and be able to turn it both ways without changing sides. It's called a pitch stroke. And it's kind of difficult to teach it. Well, this young man didn't have a choice because he had this one hand that fit over that paddle. And he was sort of made fun of sometimes by the other kids that were supposedly jocks. But when we got done, this kid took a 20-foot Grumman freighter canoe with 6 people on board. He was the stern man for that boat on the Smith River. And the only kids that dumped on that river were the jocks. But he paddled that boat fully loaded for 6 days and took that boat and never ran aground, never hit an island. And years later, I was up in Kalispell and I met his mother. And she again thanked me for that, for my small part in that. But to see these kids develop is really heart-rending for me. And with that, we'll do a short show that's set to some music. And I've got my sound engineer here. And we'll just sit back and enjoy it. And I've got one other little short array of slides. So, like I say, it's not a very long slideshow. We'll keep the yawn factor at a minimum.
Come along and sing river with me. Come on along and live again.
These slides are from even further back. A lot of these slides are taken around 1974, when my father was the scoutmaster taking things in. There was, it's amazing how little the mountains have changed. The only thing that's different now is the mountains have gotten bigger. You find that every year. This flower is called Dusty Maid. And you might not believe it, maybe it's because we're up in the mountains for so long, we've forgotten what good things smell and taste like. But that flower, I've had more than one person say that it smells just like German chocolate cake. Now, maybe it's because we've been in the hills so long we haven't tasted German chocolate cake, we're suffering from withdrawal. This lake is, that's Lost Lake. The lake further in the distance is Crystal Lake, which is just above Lindbergh. And that's looking east across the Swan Mountains. This mountain is called Mountaineer Peak. Most of you have seen this mountain, probably don't know it, but when you drive over the Bison Range Hill and you see the garden wall above that waterfall, when you break over the hill, the south or right-hand anchor of that wall is Mountaineer Peak. This is the backside from the Swan side. It's 9,200 feet high, and I've stood there with my father and my sons at the same time. That's the view from that mountain. That's looking south toward Missoula. Gray Wolf Peak is in the distance. Now, it's interesting on Lost Lake, it took me the first year after I had a hip replacement. The first year after my hip replacement was my celebration trip because I'd been on the floor for about a year and a half. And we went there for my celebration trip, and it still takes all day to go from one end of the lake to the other. So we had a camping spot just between bottom end and top end of the lake, and then it's another day to get up on this ridge. At least for me it is. Some young guy like Willie Bateman could probably walk up there in an hour. I believe the young man in the middle is Kelly O'Toole. If you know, any of you remember the O'Tooles that used to live here. And my father's on the left, back. The other one in the middle is Phil Harston. He worked in the X-ray department in Missoula. And the one on the right is Darrell Thompson. And he worked at our shop for a number of years. This lake is called High Park Lake. It's another lake that's above Crystal Lake in a different drainage off to the south. And the peaks to the right that you see are called the Sunset Crags. And in the evening, when the sun goes down, all of those mountains, those crags turn bright yellow. That's why they're called Sunset Crags. There's a lichen that grows on the sides, and they turn a brilliant yellow every sunset. This is in the upper High Park Basin. When we camp up there, every person had their own spring. There was 1,000 springs in there, in every little draw. There's another view of High Park Lake. This is called, I believe that's Weather Peak. This is up in the, we're just south of Gray Wolf Lake. People ask, what trail do we take? There are none. That's another view looking at Turquoise Lake in the foreground, and right next to it in the middle is Lace Lake. And the lake down below is Glacier Lake. That's a pretty popular lake to hike into. And another view, this little lake, the little puddle in front that you see, it looks like it's just a few feet from that other lake. It's actually 1,000 feet above that other water, and it takes all day to get between those two lakes. Now this is another view from the top of Mountaineer Peak. We're looking across the top of that garden wall that you see from the Bison Hill. And we're looking north, the peak, the highest peak on the horizon that you see there is McDonald. And it's at 10,000. This little lake feeds the waterfall that you see when you come over the Bison Range Hill. That's called Lucifer Lake, and the little puddle above it is called Picture Lake. I think the reason they call Lucifer Lake is because you have to work like the devil to get up there. Another view from the top of Mountaineer Peak. Mountaineer is not the highest peak, but it's probably my favorite one to climb because it's a true point. When you get on top, you can literally just turn around and see 14 lakes and 7 glaciers. Sometimes it rains and sometimes it snows in August. And it did both on that trip. There are places up there that you feel guilty walking across it because you cannot step without crushing a plow. One thing about the way we organize these trips, we changed. Some troops would go up and set up a base camp and then do day trips up and down. We found that didn't work too well because the boys would get bored. So when we took a trip, we moved every day. We took down their camp, put it in their back, and then we'd go someplace else, set up camp again. And we didn't have to worry about them running around in the evening because they were tired out. That's the name of the game for the adults, is to keep the kids tired without killing yourself. Another shot of the Upper High Park Basin, one of my favorite places. This is called Mountain Gentian. That was my father's favorite flower. And that's so steep it turns upside down. And that's it, folks, for now. If you have any questions, feel free to answer.
Todd, when you went in, what was your route?
It varied. We had about, over the years, we worked out about 6 different trips usually with the young men.
Did you usually come in from the Swan side and go over?
Most of the time. The worst, I wouldn't say the worst, the most scenic and the most difficult trip we ever took is we started up that canyon where that waterfall is, from the Bison hillside. We climbed, instead of going up to that waterfall, you see there's a side canyon called Sonny Ellen Creek. And there's a lake up in there, and then there's a pass on up. And we had planned on going to Sonny Ellen Lake the first night. We got within 500 feet and we ran out of daylight. We actually trenched in on some ledges, and the climb is 3,700 vertical feet in 3/4 of a mile. So it was a little steep, but we were alongside gorgeous waterfalls all the way up. There's nothing but a waterfall all day beside you. It was really impressive.
Is there still any real glaciers up there?
Oh yes. Yes.
They're probably smaller than they were 20, 30 years ago.
They are, but one of the things that I've noticed, and people think it was just general warming conditions that caused a lot of that shrinkage. What really was causing the shrinkage through the 80s and 90s was Mount St. Helens. Because what happens is the snow would melt back to that ash, and 4 years after the St. Helens occurred, we would go up and find ash on that snow. And of course the ash was dark and the sun would drive, and we noticed the snow would melt right before our eyes. In one day we could see the snow melt under that dark ash. The ash was quite dark and it would soak up that sunshine. And that was a big factor in shrinking those glaciers. Anybody else? Thank you very much.
Well, I guess next on our agenda would be to have 3 scouts from Bonner here, just reminisce on the stories that they experienced as growing up out here.
Max, Ilona Ruan or Angus sent this, and maybe Dusty can read this, or if you want to. It's on Grant Higgins. Maybe we should.
Oh, yes. Dusty, would you do the honor?
Sure. Miney, can you turn up the light just a little bit? While she's doing that, let me say that Bill and Mike and I and Max were all about the same age, and by the time we got involved in scouting in the 50s, there was already a lot of stuff that had gone before us. And I was thinking in connection with this presentation today that one of those old-time scouters was Grant Higgins. And so I'm really glad to see Ilona did this little piece on Grant, because he really was one of the founders of scouting in the Bonner area. And he was followed by a fellow by the name of Art Pine, and then about the time Art got out of it's when we got in, and generally speaking, we were all Larry Burlingame's scouts. So let me read this about Grant Higgins. Grant Higgins, scout leader, 1940s and 50s. Grant Higgins was a scout leader in the late 40s and early 50s when my brothers Ray and Dennis were in scouts. His goal was to provide the boys training and exposure to many of life's skills and chores. The boys were in the program a few years, at which time they used the Boy Scout manuals and worked towards getting merit badges in first aid, hiking, swimming, skiing, camping, and other life skills. They went on to summer camp at the Boy Scout camp at City Lake. Grant was not only involved with the Scout program, he also taught swimming to numerous boys and girls in the Blackfoot River between the cliff and the train bridge above the Bonner Mill. We all learned to swim and run the logs safely across the river. Logs were floating down the river to be used in the sawmill. Grant was qualified to certify young people in water safety programs. Many of them continued on with jobs at the McCormick Higgins Pool as lifeguards and swim instructors. Winter sports and activities brought Grant with youngsters to teach ice skating and skiing. He worked with and promoted my brother Rudy to develop his skiing as a national champion and Olympic hopeful, but he fell and broke his heel training for the Olympics in Colorado. Having no children of his own, he set a fine example showing honesty, high morals, and discipline for all. His employment was at the Anaconda Lumber Mill in Bonner as head timekeeper and first aid when needed. Grant is a grandson of one of Missoula's founders, Captain C.P. Higgins. Much of the information regarding the Higgins families at the Fort Missoula Museum, our developing area in Milltown and Bonner, would do well to name something in his honor. And this is from Iona Rihanna Higgins, West Riverside, March 20th, 2011. So I think that's a good point. Grant Higgins really was kind of a model to a lot of us, and we probably as a community ought to think about naming something in his honor.
Also named in Grant Higgins' honor was the chairlift chairlift.
Yeah,
Marshall's
at Marshall,
chair, and
that's right.
They named it the Grand Higgins Chair.
Forgot about that.
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. That's a good point. I'd forgotten that, but that's true. Well, who wants to go next? Well, let me start. You know, like I say, in thinking about this, and I'm really glad Tom brought those slides, because I kind of rummaged around this morning looking for some old pictures and didn't have much luck, and so it's nice to have something like that to show what scouting has done for all of us. And frankly, when we were kids, there wasn't the wealth of things going on in the community that there are today. There weren't much in the way of athletics, there wasn't much in the way of activities, and generally speaking, with the exception of basketball in the wintertime, the only thing that there was scouts. And as a consequence, everybody belonged to it. And it's not like today where maybe some kids participate, but most don't. In those days, everybody participated. It was just one of the things you did. And I remember starting out in Cub Scouts with Mike. Bill was a year behind us, but I'm sure he was right along there shortly behind us. And I know there was a problem finding a Cub master. And some of the ladies got together and thought, well, Larry Burlingame, who was a bachelor and a school teacher at the school, didn't have anything to do, and that'd be a good thing for Larry, is to be the Cub master. And they recruited him, and he was our Cub master. And about the time, Max mentioned that he was in the 6th grade, didn't she say? Well, he went from one class to another.
5th to the 6th.
5th to the 6th, and with our class, Mike and mine. And about that same time that he transitioned from the 5th grade to the 6th grade, they needed a scoutmaster for Troop 5. And he kind of graduated right along with us from Cub Scouts to Boy Scouts, and was our scoutmaster for a number of years, and really, I think was a amazing leader for all of us. We generated more Eagle Scouts, I think, than hardly any troop in the country did during those years, and it was largely because of his involvement and leadership that we all accomplished that. And then eventually, some of us hadn't quite gotten our Eagles yet when we were in Scouts, and we moved on to high school, and you became explorers, and he was our explorer advisor too, and most of us got our Eagle Scouts, I think, about our freshman year in high school. It might have been a couple of, I think Bill was kind of a child prodigy, and he got his in the 8th grade, but most of us had to wait till we were freshmen. And we took some trips too. We didn't go into the missions. Most of our trips were shorter than that. We had a number of camps all over the place, and of course it'd rain every time we went camping, but Larry used to joke that the community would be stricken by drought, and finally the desperate community would come to Larry and say, Larry, would you call a camp out so that it'd make it rain? And it always did, of course. One of the big trips I remember was a canoe trip on Flathead Lake. And I see the Higgins kids went to the scout camp at City Lake. We went to Melita Island, did it for a number of years, and we were all pretty fancy. The community got together, bought us all uniforms with shorts, and boy, we were cats meow. But we did one canoe trip on Flathead. It was a week-long trip. Took us several days to make our way up north, and we ran out of time. We had to come back, and we did all that in one day. But that was really one of the high points of my scouting career. And so I guess I've probably talked enough. Mike or Bill, do one of you want to pick up where I left off?
Go ahead, Bill.
Just a couple, I was thinking of a couple things to chat about. In my experience, when my family moved to Milltown when I was in the 4th grade, and I didn't know I had a choice not to be a Boy Scout. I thought this was kind of understood that that's what you did, was become a Boy Scout, and I did. And I remember, especially Larry Burlingame, and going through that and working towards the Eagle Scout badge, which the three of us got, I think, at the same time, along with about 4 or 5 other boys from the community. But a couple of my fond memories, probably the fondest memory was a camp that Dusty alluded to. One of the camp spots we had was, and we called it Camp Deschamps. It was up real close to where Dusty lives now. And we would go up there, and we had different parts. You know, the Milltown boys had a part. I had a place they stayed, and boy, you took care of your place, and you didn't help anybody else with theirs because we wanted ours to be the nicest. But we, I recall a couple summers going to Maid Island, and even though we were Boy Scouts, and every one of them ended up, I think, in life being a very upstanding citizen, we were still from a blue-collar community. And so one time up at Maid Island, I remember, I won't name who was involved, but I was involved, and we killed a squirrel. And Larry Burlingame says, well, if you kill something alive like that, then you have to eat it. So we butchered it and skinned it out and got a frying pan with butter and cooked it and ate it. And by golly, it wasn't too bad. So we went out hunting again, and Larry and Mr. Burlingame said, where are you going? And we said, we're going to get some more squirrels. And he said, well, I just want you to know, if you get any more, you're eating them raw. So we put off hunting anymore. But, and again, kind of a funny thing that I remember is the canoe trip that we took up Flathead Lake. One night we ended up near the Lutheran Bible camp, and they had girls in their camp along with some boys. And we thought that was pretty cool. We thought we were going to get to spend the night there by the Bible camp with these girls and be able to talk to them and that. And that didn't happen. We moved on. I think Mr. Burlingame knew that was potential trouble. So we moved on. But I guess my experience, one of the things that was really important to me is later on in life is when I would apply for a job, and I would have on my resume that I was an Eagle Scout. A couple of times in the interviews, that was really the only thing that the interviewer would talk to me about off of my resume, was the fact that I was an Eagle Scout. And when I put it on there, I didn't really think a lot about it. Somebody had told me, include that in your resume, and it was really important, and it really stood out. One of the things that really stood out in my resume. And so, it's looking back, the times I had, not only personal times, but the times I got to spend with friends that are still my friends, 55 years later is just priceless to me. But we did have a lot of good times. We really, we were young boys that were mischievous oftentimes, but I think if you look at the picture of the Eagle Scouts that I was a part of, all those guys did well.
Well, like Bill and Dusty said, we all kind of started out together. And I can remember, clear back in the first grade, my first den mothers were Mary Poffenberger and Lee and Leona Nelson. They had a boy, Leonard Nelson, some of you might remember way back. And, they started us out in Cub Scouts, but the big thing in Cub Scouts, as I remember, as Dusty already said, really the start of the Cub Scouts with our big group was his mother, Dorothy Deschamps, Pat Thibodeau, Percy Thibodeau's wife. I mean, they really did start us into scouting. And I can remember one time, probably in the second, third grade, one of our, I don't know what you call it, they would do little skits and this sort of thing. And you'd go against the other Cub Scout things around here and to see who would win the best show you could put on. Well, ours was the Knights of the Round Table, it was kind of called, and I got this big idea to make this, a shield, it looked like, kind of like the old Knights of the Round Table. And I remember, you're in about the 3rd grade and the saw was bigger than I was, but at that time we didn't have TV, and I remember my folks were in listening to the radio, and my mother had this nice old oak table that she had gotten from I guess her mother or something, and I'm up standing on the table sawing this, and I sawed the whole end of the table off along with the shield. I'll tell you, I wasn't in real good happy times in back in them days. But as time went on, getting into Boy Scouts, this is one kind of on Dusty. We had one of the first camps I ever went on, and our scoutmaster at that time was Bert Lone, and I think George Pataya. I think Art Pine had given that. And the men here at the Lutheran Church, you had to have a sponsor, and I think at that time, the sponsor was like, not Ladies Aid, but the men's group that was here. And Bert Lone took us up in an old truck up on the Bison Range. And today, they must have known it, but we camped on, I think it's Crow Creek that goes through the Bison Range, and it's just full of rattlesnakes, and kids are digging in rock piles and digging out snakes. I don't think anybody was ever bit, but that night we slept there, and I think Dusty and I slept in a little pup tent. Well, I woke up,
I was gone.
and Dusty was gone. Well, he found out, and he was always eating different things. In that creek, there was these freshwater mussels, and they were about that big around, and we boiled them in a coffee can or something, and he ate a bunch of them, and I think he hallucinated during the night, because they found him about a mile down the road, just in his underwear, walking down the road. But I went on many, many camps, and had lots of fun. Bill was real polite calling Mr. Burlingame. We always just call him Burley, or he had another name, but we won't say what that name was. But he was a great scout leader for us. And the thing that I do remember is how the fathers and the mothers always got together. When they come to these merit badges, every father, not every father, but most every father would take a special merit badge project, and you'd get all the groups, the kids together. And the one that I remember so well was Barney Hegdahl. You probably all remember Barney. He had migrated to the United States from Norway, and he'd gone through this citizenship thing to become a citizen. And I'll tell you, you had to learn your citizenship before he would write on your little card, that you could pass it, And there was a lot of the other fathers and, different things. The one thing I will remember is my cooking badge. I was telling Linda, my wife, about it this morning. Victor McKee and I, we had to do this cooking, so out in the backyard, and the mill used to bring in these big timber ends, they were timber ends. And so we built this stove out of this wood, Can you imagine what happens when you get a fire going in a wood stove? We damn near burned up Milltown, man. Of course, there wasn't much left of the cooking, But he did teach us a lot, as far as swimming and there was projects going all the time, like Dusty referred to. We didn't go to town to do things. We stayed out here and did things. We'd have dances at I don't know if you remember where the Hellgate Rifle Club is down here on Pine Grove down there. They'd rent that, or the folks would rent, not my folks, but all of them get together, and we'd have dances, and we'd ask the girls to come there. And it seemed like every time I came out of there, I had a headache. And I think the reason was they used to shoot inside there, and it smelled like that gunpowder. I can still remember getting a headache just about every time, you'd be in there dancing for an hour or 2 or 3, and I can remember always getting a headache after those dances come down there, and I wonder if that's what it was, the smell of that gunpowder.
I wonder if it was lead dust.
Well, it could have been.
Seriously.
They shot in there, and nobody ever thought about that sort of thing, back in them days. But, like Bill said, and Max, and we just had a great time as being scouts back in those days, But it's fun to kind of reminisce about those kind of stories, and all the things we did. A lot of stories we can't tell you, you know. You know, Bill and I have talked about them before. I mean, they weren't bad, but I mean, oh, we better not tell that, better not tell that. But it was fun. We had great times out here. And that's about all I can remember right now anyway, Max.
Well, I recall, whoops.
I'd just like to say, one of the things that I never got to experience is going to a national jamboree, but Pat McDonald's here, and I think, Pat, did you go to a national jamboree?
1953.
1953, and maybe, you know, I've always heard about them, but I never went to one. Maybe you can tell the group a little bit about that.
It was a wonderful time. You were talking about Art Pine, and he was our leader at that time. And I didn't get to 53. I was in the 8th grade. And I can't remember exactly why the scouting just started then or how it transpired. That's when we got involved. There was Mickey Gotcher and Chucky Reardon and myself went on the jamboree. And that was a big, big deal. And it's still, it's a big deal. And I remember there was Walt Stage was a leader and Claire Conroy was a leader. One of the big parts of it, they put us on a train and took us on a train out to Seattle and then on down to Irvine, California. And, you know, didn't get to ride on trains very often back then, and that was a lot of fun and all those guys together. And then I remember they put us on a big Greyhound bus and we were going along the coast down in California. And most of us had never seen the ocean. And so they pulled off the bus one day they were going along on a nice sunshiny day and told us to get into our suits and go swimming. Well, we come running out into that turf. And man, it's just boiling. And you know, we, a bunch of kids, we'd never seen the ocean, and I'm still amazed that some of us didn't drown that day. You go out there and you just barrel your head over tail, you know, so that was fun. And then the jamboree was in Irvine, California, which if you drive down Irvine now, you see 10 gazillion homes. Back then it was just a big open, barren ranch. And it was a festive time, and one of the highlights was the evening that I'm losing names here, the master of ceremonies was Bob Hope. And so you had thousands of kids in there. It was a huge deal. And Bob Hope was the master of ceremonies. They had, it seemed like an endless number of movie stars that came out that night under the lights, and they were all riding in brand new red Chevy convertibles with the top down. Ooh, boy, was that impressive. So anyway, that was kind of a highlight of my scouting, and I guess being at that age and high school coming up, and I never got my Eagle badge, and my interest kind of changed right thereafter, but it was a great time.
Well, I remember that I didn't go to Jamboree, and I was really jealous of the kids that did. I know there was a contingent from Troop 5 that went. The only one I can think of right off hand, though, is Jimmy Thibodeau. I know he went, but there must have been some others.
Was that at Valley Forge?
I think so. They had, and I remember the Anaconda Company gave them walking sticks, you know, with ACM written on the side of it. And I think those are big trading items, but I didn't get to go, and I was really jealous. And I don't think it had anything to do with scouting, but there was some other deal that happened where they had something for disadvantaged kids.
Oh, yeah.
And Mike went, and of course they didn't think I was disadvantaged. I didn't get to go. I was really upset about that.
Well, it was kind of a funny deal. It was the Liquor Association that put it on for the kids, and the church here is the ones that sent us. Now, I kind of, you know, it was hard to believe that was the way it went, but it was just over in the other church. There was Larry Jacobson, Billy Walker, myself, and somebody else went to that. But, you know, the Liquor Association put it on for disadvantaged kids as we were out here, and the church is the ones that sent us. I remember that.
One of the to do a little follow-up on, there was a lot of mention of Lita Ida. That was kind of a miracle in itself in later years. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that story. But, you know, Melita Island went dormant for, the Scouts lost it. And it stayed there for about almost 40 years. 30 or 40 years, I believe it was. Nothing happened. It never got sold. It changed, well, it did get sold. It changed hands, I think, about 5 times. But it never got subdivided. And the island was contingent with a parcel of land on the shore of Flathead Lake. And for years, nothing happened. And then a fellow picked it up, and he had planned on making it his retirement home. He was going to have a guest house on the shore, and his house was going to be on the Lita Island. And he went over to the island, and he found the old pavilion. And he looked at what it was. He said, well, this was a Scout island. And he says, this needs to stay a Scout island. And there were a lot of miracles that occurred. He contacted the local Scout offices here, the councils, and they made an arrangement. And I happened to be privileged to go there when they had the first camp out after so many, many years. And we got to take the boys back to that island. And I went there as a water safety person, went to kayak canoes and stuff and helped the boys. But later on, he agreed to sell it back to the Scouts at a much, much reduced price. I don't know how many millions of dollars that thing, you know, anything on Flathead is millions, and it's all 6 figures. But he had agreed to sell it at, I think it was 1/3 of the appraised value. And they were working hard. There was a bunch of adults formed the Phoenix Patrol that worked on getting that island back. And they had a deadline. And they kept trying fundraisers, and they had raised about a little over half. And the deadline was New Year's. I remember it so well, it's been just a few years ago. But the deadline was midnight on the 31st of December. And as of Christmas, they still didn't have that money. And on the evening of New Year's Eve, an anonymous person came forward, donated $500,000, and got it. So it was really amazing. Yes.
Tom, I'm Tim Fury, and Bonner Troop was a big part of getting the island back into shape. And our troop was also up there the very first official weekend doing service projects, and it was a lot of the old Bonner Scouts that helped raise that money, and the most significant one that started the Phoenix Patrol and got the money going was Chris Roberts.
Yes.
And I don't know how he fits into your era, but and Dale Kohler helped out, and I'll tell you, the work that they did and that our troop did in the 90s to help rebuild it. And then it was Fred Cox who owned the island, and he was some kind of software investor or something, and he saw the spirit that we had and how we fixed it up. And now they have a sawmill rig on the island. The lodge is beautiful again, and they're running it as a summer camp and year-round camp.
Yeah, it was a tremendous effort.
Yeah, and you know, anybody that wants to go out there, Tim did, I think you just go out there anytime, but I know they have, I get the Phoenix Patrol emails, and they have work projects all the time that where the adults can go, and it's kind of interesting. If you ever were on Melita and you haven't been there for a long time, it'd be worth your while to go up there and just see what it looks like now.
Full waterfront, they probably have 10 sailboats.
It finished on a brand new dock. There's a real nice dock out there now.
Troops come from all over the country now to use that as their summer camp. Can I say a few things about the modern day Bonner Troop?
Yes.
I was a scout leader for almost 10 years in the 90s mostly, and I just want to and my son Brian is here, and my wife Sue. And I just wanted to share something about the Scouts, and maybe Brian could say something about the activities. We had 9 Eagle Scouts over about a 9-year period, and some of the projects are, one is right here on the north side of the church, kind of a rock garden that Charlie Gale did. We did improvements at the Lions Ball Field. The Humane Society built, I don't know, 15 dog houses or something. The rest stop across from the town pump was an Eagle Scout project. There's a trail to the Buffalo if you ever want to go on a 1 or 2 mile hike up on Mount Jumbo. There's an official trail, that was an Eagle Scout project. And we also had the pancake breakfast, and some of you guys maybe had started it, but Troop 5 or Troop 4 continued to work on that. And one year we raised so much money we didn't know what to do with it, so we gave it to the fire department, and they bought these laser heat sensors so they could go into a burning home and find out if there were any people inside. We raised over $1,000. We also raised money for Aaron Hall, who was an Eagle Scout here. He got all banged up skiing. We gave, I think, over $1,000 to Aaron. And then just something I'm very proud of, we've had 4 scouts that have been in Iraq, served in Iraq. One went to the Air Force Academy. We got one that was a legislator, now a diplomat in the Foreign Service, and then one scout that won the National Merit Honor Award for saving the lives, putting his own life in danger, and that was Aaron Hall, who physically took on a mountain lion to save a little boy. And I was the leader of the troop then, and I saw the pictures of the little boy, and the cat had picked the kid up by the neck and started dragging him away. And Marshall Mountain. Yeah. And Aaron was one of the day camp leaders, and he really did a job on that mountain lion. And so pretty proud of our modern day scouts. And maybe Brian, you can say some of the activities, I don't know if you want to share.
Hey, Tim, can I just interrupt you for just a minute? That reminded me of something. We've actually got a national hero up here at the front table. Mike got that award when he was a scout. And he could tell you exactly what happened, but as I understand it, there was a bunch of kids on the Milltown Reservoir, and somehow or another they got out on a raft, and they're heading for the dam. And Mike sees this, and I don't know whether he got a boat or I don't know. Somehow or another he got out there, got these kids rescued and back to shore, and he got national, I think it was a Carnegie Award, wasn't it?
Both the Scout one and the Carnegie Award.
But anyway, he's a genuine hero, and a lot of people don't know that. Sorry.
Okay, let me interrupt here. I'm Doug Grimm, and I worked with Boy Scouts in the Radisson for about 10 years with Dr. David Gray and Roy Gilmore. And Dennis, where's Dennis Singh? Dennis?
Behind you.
Oh, okay. But, you know, scouting teaches the boys things that you never ever guessed would be life-saving at the time you're learning these things. And Mike, would you say that what you learned in Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts helped you save a life?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
We've taken a life-saving course at the university through scouting.
Right. And you know, what a tremendous advantage people who are in Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts have over just the average individual in the community. For instance, about, I guess it was 8 years ago, my son was working for the Missoula, delivering papers every night up to Thompson Falls in a pickup truck. And we pick up the papers about midnight, and he would drive up Arlene, and he was just past the Joe's Smoke Ring where they sell the firecrackers. And after you pass Joe's Smoke Ring, as you're headed sort of north and east, there's a big curve. It's all been redone now with a great big bridge over for the animals. Big curve, and it was 12:20. Headed like hell for Thompson Falls with a load of papers. And off to the left, down in the woods, kind of, he sees a fire. And he thought, you know, someone is burning slash, but what a strange hour to be burning slash. And he continued driving, and he thought, you know, that slash could be close enough to the woods that it would catch fire to the woods, and maybe he should check on it. So he turned around and headed back toward Missoula, and went about a mile or so, and pulled over, and there's quite a drop off there. Drop off, and then it runs over to a fence and all the pine trees. And he realizes that what he's looking at is not a slash fire, it's an automobile laying on the passenger side. And the engine compartment is engulfed in flames. And he gets out of the vehicle, and he can hear someone screaming bloody murder inside that vehicle. So he stands up on the road, here comes a car, and he flagged, no, they just went around him, another car, and they just went around him. Finally, a big chip truck comes along, evidently from a mill in Polson, and he gets that guy to stop, and he says, would you help me? And then the guy said, well, I'll give you this little fire extinguisher. Well, a little tiny fire extinguisher is not going to do anything when you have a car that's going to be completely engulfed in flames pretty soon. So he goes down there, and he gets up on top of the car, grabs the door of the driver's door, realizes the damn door is too hot to touch. So he takes his coat, which is like mine, and wraps it around it, and it sticks to the handle. He pulls it up, and he raises the hood, and he's intense heat. And he can still hear the guy, please, help me save me. And my son thought, how in the hell could a person be alive in an automobile that is that incredibly hot? And he sees down the foot underneath the gas pedal. My son has a flashlight. Of course, every Boy Scout should have a flashlight. You learn those things. You keep one in your car. You keep one wherever you go. And he sees that the guy's foot is caught underneath one of the pedals. And it's a really large guy laying there up against the door on the passenger side. And he works, he gets that foot undone, and he notices flames now coming through where the pedals are. And says to the guy, come on, you gotta help me. And he realizes that this is an 18-year-old kid, an Indian kid. And he said, you gotta help me. He said, you are too goddamn heavy for me to lift. And my son gets kind of down in there, and he starts pulling on the guy's arm, and the guy says, oh God, don't grab that arm. He says, I broke that arm in a car wreck last month. And he grabs him around the neck, and he gets him up, and gets him up. He says, you gotta push, and get him up on top of the car, and they slid him off the car, and dragged him, and another fellow came down, and he said, would you help me? And the guy, okay. He grabs his shirt like this. He said, no, you got to help me. He pulled this guy away. He pulled the fellow away about as far as that wall. And he asked this Indian kid, was there anyone else in the car? And no, are you positive? I said, and then he thought, I can't depend on this guy for anything. So he runs back to the car, and then that whole thing just becomes one great big fireball. And so my son sits there on the side of the road, and he's coughing like crazy because he has inhaled so much smoke. And he has to sit there, and a fire truck shows up from our lead. And finally, they give him oxygen, and after about 45 minutes, he is able to continue driving to Thompson Falls and dropping off papers all the way along. And he comes back, and about 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, my bedroom door. And yeah. He said, Dad? I said, yeah, what's wrong? And he told me this story. I said, oh, okay. And I fall back to sleep. And I lay there and I think, that's an incredible dream I just had. That's an incredible dream. And I phoned up the Missoula, and I say, did you just have a driver that saved someone's life? He said, well, we don't have any story like that. And I said, about 6 o'clock. I said, well, don't wake my son. He's upstairs asleep because he has to go to work at St. Pat's Hospital at about 9 o'clock. And about a minute later, I hear my son's phone upstairs ringing. They get the kid out of bed, drive him up to where the accident scene was, take a picture so they can have it for the next morning's paper. A Missoulian driver saves the kid's life. And from that, the Highway Patrol makes a recommendation to the governor, and Schweitzer invites him over to the Capitol, and we sit there, and 4 other people get these heroism awards. And I had seen a trophy, a gold medal, that someone had gotten from Nagano, Japan, when they just won first prize. It was about this big around, sort of looked like a CD disc, wasn't really fancy at all. And I looked at my son's that he had hanging around his neck with the state map on it and all this engraving and stuff, and thing on the backside saying, Tyler Grimm Heroism Award. And I said, I can't believe it. It's so much more impressive than winning a gold medal at the Olympics. And my son said, Dad, I would never have been able to do this if it hadn't been for Boy Scouts.
Few things that were touched on here. I'm a bit younger than you guys. My name's Dana Nichols. I was in Scouts in the 60s and early 70s. Mostly under the leadership of Joe Finneman. My dad was assistant scoutmaster along with Vern Mills. My younger brother, Sean, who started River City Grill, he was an Eagle Scout. My older brother was in Scouts. We went to National Jamboree in Farragut, Idaho in 1967. I still got a t-shirt for that. Of course, I can't fit it in the helmet. Saw the thousands of kids around Farragut, Idaho, all the troops. We saw the Apollo space capsules, which was pretty cool. We went on, under Penniman's direction, we went on a lot of 50-mile hikes through the Selway Bitterroot. We take up to 30 kids through there with adults. I think we had one adult for every 5 kids who went through. I was like 75 pounds carrying 35-pound pack. We would get freeze-dried food and divide it between the kids, and then each kid had to knew what they had, so they had to provide it for the meals. My mom was the cook on those hikes. They were fun. One of them, I remember we got 2 rattlesnakes the same day. We killed them because they were a little too close. The first one was killed. A bunch of kids saw it. We'd all hiked past it. It was hanging from a tree, and then some of the kids saw it, and they were beating it with rocks, and my dad went back, and he ended up killing it and brought it back, and then we got another one, and we decided we were going to cook it. Cooked rattlesnake because we heard it tasted like chicken. We wanted to see. And so we skinned them and cut it up into little sections about like that, and we didn't know how to cook. We put it on a frying pan. Well, those little sections curled right up. And we got them all cooked and gave each kid got 1 bite. A little chewy, but it was okay. We must have taken, every year we'd go through the Selway and either 50 or 60-mile hikes. One year I went on a 50-mile hike through the Selway, and a week later went through 75 miles through the Bob Marshall. I think Ken Wishart and I went. It was they had kids from each troop, and we were cleaning up the trails as we went, but we didn't have to carry our sleeping bags because they had a pack train. They carried the sleeping bags first. We'd stuff all our clothes in the sleeping bag and put it on the bed. We just had empty packs. Melita Island, we went to Melita several times. I was the last group that was up there before it went into private hands, went dormant. And it was kind of odd because that year we put in a new kitchen. I think we had some new stoves or something we put up there, and we ran a new cable over from the mainland for the power. And then the next year, we lost the island. So I was real glad to see it come back. When I got married the first time, my wife and I spent our honeymoon up at Flathead, and I took my boat up, and we went on the Leda and walked around, and it was kind of sad to see that everything boarded up. The docks, we had built new docks before that last year up there, and the docks had all washed away. And we saw the lodge, it was all boarded up, but it was still impressive. Brought back a lot of memories. But, you know, scouting, big influence. We did some of the meetings we would have over at Zimmerman's where the Lions are. We had a ball diamond set up over there, played baseball. Sometimes we went to my parents' place and we had a baseball diamond in my dad's back pasture, so we played baseball there. So, but overall, yeah, it was good times.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, Mike told the story of being up at Moise, and it had to be a district camp out. I was as a kid then in Troop 6, and it was a district camp out, and all the troops around western Montana were there. And our big briefing meeting, I remember, all the adults are giving us the warning. There are a lot of rattlesnakes up here. You kids have to be careful. And the one thing that I did notice, they didn't warn the rattlesnakes that there was Boy Scouts. You cannot believe how many rattles. I mean, kids are running around trying to find snakes so they can have rattles. You know, everything is rattles. The other story that would be nice, if my wife could tell her story of her scouting experience with our boys.
Come on, Anna.
Come on, Anna, you can do it. Let's hear it.
This is Troop 4 in the rattlesnake, and Dennis would take the boys out and teach them how to go canoeing around Marco Flats and get them all skilled. Then we'd take them on trips down behind Frenchtown Stone Container on couple-day trips. So he got known for his canoe trips. And I would take them rafting, and I got known for my canoodie trips. And I'll tell you of 2 trips, and canoodie means nudies. And one trip, I had my son JC drive the car down the Blackfoot to Daigle's Eddy, where we would stop and have lunch, and all the lunches were in the box. And we had stopped there, and I sent the kids up while I'm tying up the raft, and little Galen Hollenbach, he's now in the politics scene in Helena. Sorry, Galen. But he comes down and says, Mrs. Singh, there's nudies up there. And I says, are you sure? So he ran back up the hill and came back down and says, yes, I'm sure. And what it turned out was a man and 2 women on a blanket. So we walked, and I get back to the car, and they're stuffing sandwiches in their face as fast as they can, and just dead silence. Finally I said, did anybody see any nudies down there? And they just broke out laughing. And so then when we were done and went back on the raft, you know, I said, hi, as we went by, and they said, she talked to the nudies. But when I went down the Alberton Gorge, I had to hire Pat Doty of Rocky Mountain Whitewater, I think it was, to take it down because it's too risky on the gorge with insurance and everything. So we had about 3 rafts, and Tom Yule can tell you the most popular place to take a break is at Fish Creek on the Alberton Gorge, and it's very pretty. Well, we came up where it was by like a little hill, and there was a lady there hoping Playboy would like her photos. And she was so appropriately undressed. And she's doing her little things with her little veil that she had on, like a bridal veil. And there was two fellas taking her photos. And so after the scouts had seen everything they wanted to see, the oarsman on the raft said, "Hey, there's a bunch of Boy Scouts down here." So she bent over and gave the boys a good show. And Dr. David Gray, that was mentioned earlier, he was the scoutmaster and said, "Oh, it's too bad we don't have a photo of this because no one's going to believe the nudies." And I said, "Give me your camera." So I went back there and they covered her up and I took a picture. But I got known for, every time I took the scouts out, we ran into nudies. So I gave them a different kind of education. So when we would have the potlucks and stuff, you know, with the scout groups, we would talk to the parents and they would say, "Oh, Johnny never said anything about his rafting trip." Isn't that right, Ken?
I heard about it at my house.
Hope everybody can hear me a little bit, but maybe some of the newer stuff that Tim passed along, some of the Troop 5 stuff to Troop 4. And I was a scoutmaster at the time. I was Bill Stump, and since then passed that job along. I started out as that cub master up on the South Hills, and when the boys moved into Troop 4, when Troop 4 moved into town and stuff, I became, shortly, I think it was about a year, I said, my son, he has to get a true scout experience, similar to what I did out in the Columbia River Council when I was a kid, and that's without Dad right there and Mom right there for the first year. And it took about that long, and then I ended up doing the scoutmaster job. You know how those things, the attrition happens. But anyway, more about Troop 5 was that, as it seems as Troop 5 was going down in numbers, some of those boys were coming to Troop 4, and some of the most recent events that took place were some of the Eagle Scouts that I got to be with that came out of the Bonner area, the Monders. They built the structure in behind the school over here and did a couple other Eagle Scout projects around the area. I got a couple of more that are right in the Eagle. Dave right here, his son, he's an assistant scoutmaster out of Troop 4. Lives right down the road and works for me sometime. Patrick, his son, he's an Eagle Scout. He's coming up. I'm sure he's got a project in this area if I know. And it's just been a struggle through the last few years to get scouts. We worked hard. I've worked many hours trying to get more scouts out of this area, because it's kind of the rattlesnake troop and the Bonner troop, and that's kind of what's kept Troop 4 alive, for the last 10 years or more. But it's a wonderful thing. We've gone to Canada many times. We've been out to the Oregon coast with these boys. We have one of our scouts, in fact, our senior patrol leader is from Seeley Lake. Okay, so it just tells you the diversity in trying to get scouts together and keep, but they fight together and they meet every Monday night. And it's just a wonderful thing. But things live on. Troop 5 lives on in the fact that the Wood Badge program, which is an adult leader program across the state, it's gotten really big in Montana in recent years. The trailer, the covered trailer, is now the Wood Badge trailer for the state, and it travels to each one of the Wood Badge camps and along with all the training. So it's, it just carries on the tents. I think Dave had a Wood Badge project, and a couple of the tents that you'll see in different scout projects now have some internal pole systems for them and stuff, and those Troop 5 Boy Scout tents are still alive, the old wall tents, and lanterns and stuff. We have a whole bunch of gear. We got more gear than we need for 2 or 3 scout troops probably. But I just want to take a couple minutes to let you guys know that, part of Troop 5 still alive. The biggest reason I probably came here was to hear about Marco Flats. You know, I've been around this area for about 13 years or so. And when I was a kid, we went, in fact, when I was a Cub Scout, my dad was a Scoutmaster, we used to go up by Mount St. Helens at Spirit Lake. And it kind of went by the wayside, you know, when Mount St. Helens blew. So it was one of the old scout camps that I remember as a kid. But I do some work for some people up by Marco Flats on River Bend. And I think about that all the time, the old scout camp. So I'd like to hear the stories about that, because just hearing the stories about the scouts that used to come up to Marco Flats, well, you know, it'd be nice to take our troop up to some of those old scout camps, you know, and revisit them, you know, so.
Well, Max will probably tell you more, but I think the reason everybody quit going to Marco Flats, of course, the bridge is washed out. You can't get to it unless you go up the Wishard's Bridge and come back down the railroad tracks. But the thing that was sent in the mail is the Marco Flat thing, and the picture of Bill here was on the front. He and Dick Roski and my little brother. But we used to do a lot of camping up there.
Two Felton.
And one of them was
one of the Felton boys.
One of the Felton boys.
There's one unknown.
And there's some log work you could see in that picture. And I remember Dick Roski's uncle provided a tractor, and we skidded logs down to make all these parking places, you know. But it seemed like it was a great place for the university kids to come and drink, you know. So every time you'd fix up something, they'd have a big beer party up there. Not that I'm against drinking beer, of course, but everything that we would do up there, and there was a building up there that some church had it from the university, and it was a nice building. They had electricity and everything, and we'd rent that and have dances there at a time or two. But a lot of our camps were up at Marco Flats, you know, that we camped. And I think when they talk about Grant Higgins and Zeph Space and the old Scoutmasters, I think that's where they all camped, when you could drive up there. You know, right, you know where the Blackfoot Tavern is? Where the walking, swinging bridge is? That was the driving bridge that you went across to get over there.
Well, the upper end, I work for some people. I take care of some property, and it's like a fishing lodge on River Bend there. You know, so I look at the upper end of Marco Flats and always kind of wonder, because the property that I get to manage up there is just gorgeous, you know, and I always think about, oh, the scouts would have so much fun here, you know. Yeah. But just being a scout by blood, you know, that's just...
Right.
Fun story about Marco Flats. I remember when we were in Scouts, we went up there to clean up the flats one year, and we worked all day, and then we camped above the picnic grounds. And as we were settling down to camp and everything, then we heard a bunch of cars coming up, and it was the partiers coming up there to the picnic grounds. And they were getting a little wild, and one of the adults that was up there, we had one of those flashlights that had the blinking strobe light on it. And so we taped it to the top of his truck and took it down the road off the side road, and then come barreling up there with that light flashing. You never saw so many people separate. Cleaned it up pretty quick. No, they took that with them. Took the drill with them.
Well, I'm not much of a public speaker, but I was never in the Scouts myself. I was a trapper for over 40 years, or almost 40 years. I remember one time Mully Matson, Mike?
Oh yeah, I remember Mully.
Okay, Mully, I think he was assistant.
That's before my time, but Mully was.
Well, anyway, he wanted me to come down with a lot of the kids and get them started in rock hounding or mineralogy.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them wanted to get some
merit badges for that.
Yeah, merit badges. So I'd come down when they'd have a meeting, and I brought some stuff down and showed it to them and everything, and tried to teach them, just more or less the basics, you know, stuff of igneous and metamorphic and sedimentary formation and stuff. Well, they had this one kid in there, you probably remember him. Pat Fleming.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Every time we'd have a meeting and I'd bring some stuff down and I'd have these kids during the week or whenever they would get out, pick up a few rocks, bring them in and have them try to identify them. Well, every time we'd have a meeting, well, Pat, he'd come in with a handful of broken bricks, try to ring something in on me all the time. So anyway, there one night I told him, I said, Pat, I says, you get out along the riverbank out here, and I says, try to find something besides them broken bricks. I said, where are you getting them? He said, down on Brickyard Hill. So anyway, he didn't go very far with it, but I don't remember if any of the kids ever followed through with it. But I'd go down there, I went to 4 or 5 meetings, and there was 3 or 4 of them that were quite interested in it. And I believe one of them, I can't remember his name, he went on to the university and majored in geology. And I don't know, can't remember his name or whatever become of him, but he went a long way with it. So anyway, I tried to teach him all of the basics, what to look for, the difference between a igneous rock and a metamorphic and a sedimentary. You know, most of it around in here is all sedimentary. But they would come in with some pretty good looking stuff. They got them started in it anyway, and there was, I don't know, 3 or 4 of them that went on with it, I think. I can't ever remember the names, so. Anyway, that was my experience in the Scouts, which I was never in the Scouts myself. I learned a lot of mine by trial and error, you know. Up in the brush, been on every mountaintop around here, but got these kids started in that anyway, and most of them seem quite interested in it. So anyway, I thought I'd just bring that up.
Well, thanks. Thanks. Really interesting.
Appreciate that.
You know, something that hasn't been mentioned is we used to do winter camps. And this winter kind of reminded me of the snow we used to get back in the 60s, and we'd have winter camps up Twin Creek. And we get a lot of snow up there. One year, the mill took up a bunch of timbers to supply for firewood, and there were 3 inches thick, about 6 feet long, and we dug trails. We probably had 4 feet of snow up there. We dug trails through with our troop. It was all the Missoula Council went up there for the camp, and they would have contests. You could take a dog sled up, and you had the kids pulling it. You had to build your own sled, you had the kids pulling it in this race.
Klondike Derby?
Yeah, Klondike Derbies. And remember a few of them. But we took those timbers and we would dig out through trails through that snow and put benches, and we used the timbers for the bench and had a table in the whole works. And I remember we set up our tent one year and didn't realize we were in a swampy area, and my sleeping bag happened to be up on a little hump, but with the body heat, it melted the snow under the tent, and the other guys in this tent on both sides of me got all soaking wet. And one of the other troops they set their tent up under a tree, which was a mistake, because we figured out we could bombard that tree with snowballs, and we flattened their tent with the snow coming out of the tree.
Basic hooliganism.
Oh yeah.
That's where I excel.
They had a sculpture contest one year too, and my brother and Steve Zimmerman and Dick Pleasant, I don't remember who all was in it, but the snow was just right for making igloos. You could chop the blocks out, and they made a full-size igloo with benches around the inside of it and everything. And they won the snow sculpture contest that year. Well, that was interesting. Dale Kohler always had for winter camps, he had a big wall tent with a wood stove in there, and that nice and warm in here, and had to come out and run through the stove in your underwear once in a while to cool off.
Okay, does anybody else have something they'd like to comment on?
Well, I remember my very first Cub Scout meeting with my son. My wife pushed us out the door and said, they're having a Cub Scout meeting at the Rattlesnake School, and we've got to go with our young son. He's old enough to join, and so we're standing there in the gym, and Dr. David Gray divides us up into 9 groups, and so there was West Rattlesnake group, and we were over in one corner of the gym, and we had, about 7 boys, and we were told that one of you are going to be the den leader for this year. So we all sat there and looked at each other, and I said, well, I don't have the time, I have too much work to do. And the next, I went around, and everyone who had a son there said, I don't have the opportunity to take charge of this either. And Dr. Gray came back and said, well, who's going to be the leader this year? The den mother. And we all said, none of us have time. And so he said, well, then maybe a couple of you can take it. So I said, well, yeah, I guess I could take it every other Wednesday after school. And this really nice looking gal said, well, I guess I could take it the other alternating Wednesdays. And so she lived over on Duncan Drive. Her name was Mrs. Craig. And the boys would be at my house, and then the next week they'd be at their house. And my son developed a really strong bond with her son. And we went through the whole year. We had a wonderful time at both of our houses. And at the end of the school year, a few weeks or months went by, and her husband had to go hunting up in Alaska. And appeared on the front page of the newspaper that they had a business in town, out on the edge of town, that was a bar. And they had some girls dancing there. And I think 3 of the girls had been arrested for prostitution. Jesse will remember this. And I never really considered touching a girl with a dollar bill to be prostitution. Maybe it was a little more than that.
There was a little more of that.
But anyway, all of a sudden, we realized the boys had been having a wonderful time with the woman who owned Red's Lounge. And I don't know if they got any merit badges for that or not. But,
Okay, where are we standing now? Any more comments? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was in a troop with Ken Wishart, and we did tons of 50 milers. I learned rattlesnake, you got to boil it first to separate the bones so it doesn't curl.
Ken learned that after we tried it on Friday.
And that sturgeons do jump in canoes. We had one, I think it was with Aaron actually. We were canoeing down the Missouri, and we came upon him. He was at the end of the canoe doing this, and we were like, what are you doing? We come up there. There's a sturgeon, big old sturgeon about like that, jumped into the canoe, and it was thrashing around, and he was like screaming like a little girl, thrashing and beating the sturgeon, just trying to. And it's just like, okay. And we used to, when they used to have the bridge up here, we bicycled to Marco Flats there, and camped there, and then we bicycled out to Wishart's Bridge there.
My recollections of Marco Flats, I think I talked a little bit about them last time with our union picnics when we had our get-togethers. It was a great place. If I remember right, about the time wood stoves were being phased out in Bonner, a lot of those wood stoves went up to Marco Flats and were in the various picnic spots. So I don't know if a guy who was interested in collecting parts of old wood stoves would find any up there or not. And there was some, like everybody was commenting on, there was some pretty rowdy parties up there. I was at a tender age when I discovered what Highlander beer tasted like at a union picnic. I found out that when you poke that hole in one of them steel cans, you poke it in all the way. you don't back off when it hisses at you, because my can of ill-gotten, or ill-gained Highlander disappeared, half of it, before I even got a taste of it. So with Marco Flats, for me, it was, there were some good memories to be had up there. And then just over the hill, back up towards, what would it be, the northwest corner of Sheep down there at the bottom, was a cabin up there. I don't know if many of you guys remember, called Woodchoppers.
Yeah.
A lot of good times up at Woodchoppers.
There was one other cabin up there. The Boy Scouts had a cabin up
Yeah,
on
Boy Scouts this way.
Yeah.
And down below what they call necessity campgrounds.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Right,
That was
there's
the
place
place. Okay.
That was wood choppers.
Lots of scouts. So, one thing that we haven't touched on, and I'd like to make mention to it, is the Girl Scout program that we had out here. The only information I've been able to find for Girl Scouts was headed up by Mrs. Norman Jacobson. And the Campfire Girls, I found the name of Nancy Fontaine. And we haven't heard much from the gals, you know, and what was involved with the Girl Scouts, but I wanted to mention those names in case we might generate some interest along those lines to see what the gals used to do.
I know one thing they used to do. My sister was in one of the Bluebird Campfire Girls, you know, and I remember when somebody said the Boy Scout used to go to Sealy Lake, that later became the Girl Scout thing. And I remember taking my sister up there. I was probably in the second grade, third grade, and she was maybe in the sixth, or maybe even younger. But all the girls got homesick, and I bet you every one of them, their folks had to go up and get them and bring them home, you know. And it was, you remember Gordon Bond that worked out at the mill?
Yeah.
His wife was a Girl Scout leader, and then Uno Copa's wife, Margaret, they were the Girl Scout leaders out in this area for a while, but that would be way back in the 50s, early 50s.
My mother was real big in campfire.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
with the girls.
I don't know much about it, other than I know she was doing it.
Well, Shirley Lady was part of that too for a while.
Okay, any other?
Hey, well, Shirley, you might remember, was anything going on with the girls in our age group?
Yes, in our age group, there was Joan McClellan's mother, Genevieve McClellan, and Gloria Erickson, Gloria Nyquist's mother, Kira, were our leaders. And I think during the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, we had it at Bonner School, but I think it dissolved after that, I don't know.
Okay, well, I guess that's our wrap for us. Whoops.
Just on a newer note, there is a Girl Scout troop that has formed out here again. The leader's name is Darcy Markworth, and she lives over here off of Sunny Banks.
I think I might know her.
She and one other gal do have a young Girl Scout troop started out here again.
All right, excellent.
Hey, Max, you want to put this in your notes?
One of the things you might mention, or we might mention, are all the people that, I guess, helped while their kids were going through the Scouts. You know, Slim Spalding comes to mind, and Al Unger, and Clarence Hay, and some of those people that did a lot of things, because he mentioned the idea of the wood trailer, or whatever you called it. But remember when Slim started that poke and chip thing? You had, in order to use a knife or an axe, you had to have that little chip, and you have to pass, I guess, a test on how to use a knife and hatchet or axe or anything. And it was a big deal for a while, because Burley wouldn't let you use a knife or an axe if you didn't have that
little chip. These, I remember they were all numbered and everything.
There's still in effect, you lose a corner off of it, and if you lose all 4 corners, well, unless you do something really bad, okay? You might lose your chip right away, but you actually lose a corner every time you do something bad, and then you have to go back through the process. I was getting it. It's hard.
That was a big deal. I know when Ronnie was, well, you might remember too, he worked for the railroad, so he knew Morse code really well. And so he taught the kids after we went by, but he really taught the kids how to use Morse code and stuff real well.
Well, today, just the story is one of the camps that we went to is the totem chip and the pocket knife. And I think when I was there, you were pretty lucky to have a pocket knife. And, you get one when your dad thought you maybe wouldn't cut your thumb off and your mom wouldn't scream too loud or something. But you go to a scout camp today and you have to take about 10 of them away from a kid, so you get him down to 1 or 2 during scout camp. So things have changed a little.
Okay. I guess it looks like a wrap for us on this one.
I could
Nope,
ask
one more.
I'm not sure, we need to talk to the guy that's in the leadership, but we've talked about it sometimes. The 3rd Monday of the month, we've been kind of for a while thinking about having a meeting location out here where we actually had a troop meeting in Bonner. So if anybody knows of a good scout, a good type of, it'd be nice if it had some outdoors into it where kids could get to the outdoors, but we're looking for a meeting hall on Monday nights.
Lions Park is a good one.
Is it?
Lions Barn.
I should have called Tim, is probably what I should have.
Okay, well, I guess we have a wrap now. I think we ought to give a round of applause to these guys. They definitely give us some insight on scouting out here. Brought back some great memories for me, and it's just good to see everybody again. So,
We got scouting stuff on display out there.
Oh, okay. There's a display to look at. Okay, appreciate it.